Hi, I'm Philosophy of Science, and this is my channel where I normally take a look at things concerning scientific method, but today is going to be a bit different. This is because I watched Nathan Oaklys stream where the quantum razor was talking about fallacies, and from that stream it was blatantly obvious that quantum razor doesn't know, well, he has surface level understanding of fallacies, which basically means that he probably read a definition of fallacies from some website and that's it. I think he claimed in one video that he have studied fallacies in the university in the past, but not much or something like that. But I'm really doubtful that he ever studied at all, because it doesn't sound like he has any academic understanding of fallacies. It just sounds like he just read a definition on a website. And I think if he actually would have studied fallacies in the university, he wouldn't have such a obviously simplified understanding of fallacies, because on the university you actually learn that fallacies aren't that they are not as simple as it may look at first. I have studied fallacies, like actually really studied fallacies at the university, not much, about 2 courses, and then I used to debate. I was a president of the debating club, and there was an argumentation researcher who taught us about how to use fallacies in a debating context, and I've read on my own a little bit about fallacies. I maybe have actually 3 or 4 courses in fallacies. Well, I'm not sure. Few courses. I'm not like a high-level expert, but I would say that I'm like a pretty well-read hobbyist. I would consider myself as hobbyist, but I think I about know what I'm talking about, and well, way more than quantum razor. Now, this video structure is going to be, I'm first going to have a little lecture, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, just tell you about a current understanding, an academic understanding of fallacies, and why, from the academic perspective, from the perspective of the people who actually study fallacies and just don't read definitions on a website, quantum razor's understanding is very, very wrong. And then I'm going to go over at least some of the fallacies that quantum razor brings up. I think he says that there is like 20 or something. So I'm not going to cover all of them in this video. I'm going to probably make 2 videos about this. But I'm going to put a timestamp here that tells you when the lecture is over, and you can just jump there if you are not interested in learning about fallacies. But if you are going to debate flat earthers, or if you are a flat earther and you want to debate anyone else, if you are actually anyone who's interested in debating at all, I would just like urge you to listen to this and get even this like little understanding of how these things are studied in the university. But okay, and now let's start the lecture. Here you should see on the screen my first slide, and it says traditional treatment of fallacies. And this is the traditional treatment of fallacies can be defined in one sentence, and it would be that fallacy is an argument that appears to be valid, but it is not. So fallacy is an argument that appears to be valid, but it's not. And this is actually the understanding that quantum razor has. This is the view that or most of the websites I have looked at has. And this even some, like I haven't like read like the latest textbooks on fallacies, but I know that textbooks that were published somewhere around 5 years ago, I've seen that still has this way of defining fallacies. The thing about this is that it can be divided into these. It has these three elements. So I've written here that according to the traditional treatment of fallacy has three components. First, it is an argument. Second, it looks valid. And third, it is in fact invalid. And traditionally it is thought that fallacy has all these three things. But according to Hamblin, the traditional treatment of fallacies is incorrect, and basically practically everyone ever since, every researcher from 1970s today agree with Hamblin that the traditional treatment is wrong. Fallacy is not an argument that appears to be valid but is not, and where these contemporary treatments differ is that some of them think that one of these three things that I've listed here is wrong. Some think that two of these things are wrong, and some treatment think that all of these things are wrong. But at least every contemporary treatment thinks that at least one of these doesn't apply, which means that this way of defining fallacies cannot be right. Yeah, that was about history. There are different problems why different treatments think that one of these things doesn't apply, but I'm not going to go into that because it would be its own video. I'm just going to give you very like small review of the literature. And here is one of the contemporary treatments that I decided to. Well, I'm not actually going to use these 5 things that I listed here. I'm just going to use this framework, like generally this framework when I analyze those fallacies. But according to the Walton, Walton is like huge researcher in the field of fallacies. He's written like I don't know how much, like a lot. But this and I forget to mention that Hamblin 1970 book called Fallacies is where I'm like what I'm referring to here, and here I'm referring to the Walton 95 book Pragmatic Theory of Fallacies, and there Walton says that a fallacy is an argument or something that purports to be an argument that falls short of some standard of correctness, is used in a context of dialogue, has a semblance of correctness about it, and poses a serious problem to the realization of the goals of the dialogue. And how this differs from the traditional treatment of fallacy is here. The distinction from traditional treatment of fallacy is that it does not need to be an argument. Just it purports to be an argument, so it's like claiming to be an argument. I did write there that it looks like one, but the correct way of saying it would be that it claims to be an argument. And so this would be that here it is an argument, it just needs to claim to be an argument, and it doesn't have invalidity condition. The standard of correctness varies according to the context. So this is more this falls short of some standard of correctness. It's more permissible. The invalidity condition is extremely strict. It's a logical definition of it is logical condition, so it's very strict. But the Walton's formulation fall short of some standard of correctness is much more permissible. So the only thing that is left from this traditional treatment is that it looks valid. So Walton only keeps from traditional treatment the condition that it looks valid, and it's here. It's has a semblance of correctness about it. So that is the only thing that Walton keeps, but that's not so important. It's just I'm just showing you that it's different from the traditional treatment. But this is very important. This that I have written here is very important for our analysis of these fallacies, is that Walton's theory is based on argumentation schemes that are not in itself fallacies, but kinds of arguments that sometimes are used correctly and sometimes used incorrectly. So how I would put this in a more simple terms is that there are these that some arguments may have a form. This is actually not strictly speaking correct, but I think this is like easier way to putting it. It's about correct. So I would say that there are these arguments that has a distinct form that are sometimes used fallaciously, incorrectly, and sometimes they are not. So this means that if you look a definition of a fallacy, you cannot know from just by being able to say that okay, this argument fits into this definition. You cannot know whether it is fallacious, whether it's fallacious or it's not fallacious. And the reason being because there are just these argumentation schemes that sometimes can be used correctly. So if you spot argument that has a form similar to some fallacies, you still have to argue that it is in fact a fallacy, and you can't just yell a name of a fallacy just like flat earthers are doing, because it's not enough, because it may be there are instances where almost all of these are actually called informal fallacies normally that flat earthers are talking about. So informal fallacies, you can't, when we are talking about informal fallacies, you can't see from the form of the argument whether it is fallacious or it's not. You have to still argue that it is in fact fallacious, and this depends on how you argue for it. It depends on what kind of fallacy or what kind of argumentation scheme you are interested in, and there are books written about one single fallacy and how it should be treated in like different conditions and contexts and things like that. So it's extremely it was funny because the quantum razor says that it's very easy to spot these once you know what you're looking for or something like that, and it just shows that he has no understanding of this subject, because it's actually pretty hard to know whether sometimes whether it is fallacious or not, and you always have to argue for it. It's not enough that you can spot the form of the argument. That is somewhat easy when you learn to do it, but it doesn't mean that those arguments are fallacious. There are a lot of arguments that has a form of a fallacy and are used in science frequently. And if there is someone, quantum razor or quantum razor's followers, please send me contemporary, but let's say peer-reviewed article from fallacy research field. So it can't be just totally unrelated article that has the wrong definition of fallacy. This definition of fallacy, Quantum Razor or any of his followers, please send me a peer-reviewed article after 1970 that is saying that this definition is correct. I will put all of those in my next video, and I will admit that I was wrong if you can find peer-reviewed articles that have this definition. And for people who are arguing with flat earthers, and when they bring up fallacies, well, I know this is not going to work, but this makes your position like epistemically, like in a knowledge sense, extremely good, much better than their position. You're just going to tell them that remember the name Hamblin and his book Fallacies say that made the case that you're using wrong definition of fallacies. So this fallacies argument that appears to be valid but is not, and it has been ever since deemed wrong, absolutely wrong. Everyone thinks it's wrong. And then you can remember Walton 95, Pragmatic theory of fallacy, and then you say that you're actually referring to the Walton 95 Pragmatic theory of fallacy, and tell them this thing about argumentation seems, and that if the argument has a form of a fallacy, it doesn't mean that it is a fallacy. If they bring up any web pages, you can just tell them that it's not, of course, that it's not peer-reviewed, so it doesn't matter. And even if they bring up some textbooks, which I'm almost certain that no one will, you can just say that these always sometimes are wrong. These books are not in fact peer-reviewed because they haven't, in a sense that they haven't gone through the peer review process, but both of these books, Pragmatic Theory of Fallacy and Fallacies, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, peer-reviewed articles written about them. So in that sense, they are very much peer-reviewed. They are very much part of the academic discussion. So they are not just some random book that some random crazy person did write about fallacies. They are very much accepted in the academic study of fallacies. So they have same. They have same status as peer-reviewed articles, because you can think that the peer review has happened through the articles that have been written about these books. So it's basically the same thing, even if it's not exactly the same. It's very similar thing. Okay, and now I think my lecture is over, and we can go to the quantum razors fallacies. Okay, and here we have Quantum Razor's video, and I'm just going to play and let him talk about one fallacy at a time, and then I'm going to comment on it.
Guys, all right, let's start off with argument from silence. right? Argument from silence. And hey, Nathan, remember I said when I brought this fallacy up, I said, it sounds like it's an argument from ignorance, right? And look at what they got right there. I was loving life when I searched out the citation for this.
I'm going to stop here. This isn't actually important about the argument itself, but noticing that argument from silence is pretty similar than argument from ignorance is extremely easy. So Quantum Razor seems to be very impressed with himself that he could make this connection, which to me suggests that his knowledge is extremely low, because he's happy that he was able to make this connection. If you have actual understanding in fallacies, you would have noticed it like extremely quick at same time you read the definition, and I can explain you how, but let's continue.
And I was like, yeah. The also argument from ignorance. So, but argument from silence, this is a good one. It's the fallacy that if sources remain silent or say nothing about a given subject or question, that this in itself proves that something about the truth of the matter, right? Well, that's all kind of train wreck. And everyone knows this intuitively, but it's hard to catch. And I'm going to give you an example, and this has been recent over the past 4 months or so. Now, he's done this a lot of times, not with this particular subject about the second law. It was about the Coriolis effect. But he's been doing this for a while now, and it's Gimp Panda. And this is how it goes. There have been hundreds of thousands of people who've studied the second law, and nobody has caught on to the problem of the atmosphere next to a vacuum. You see it?
Okay, I'm going to stop here. I think this is enough. The thing to note here is, if you don't know what argument from ignorance is, it's usually defined something like that if you claim that there is no knowledge of something, therefore it doesn't exist. And yeah, it's not obviously always right, because if the thing, for example, haven't been studied, it wouldn't be a good argument. But it would be if something has been studied extensively and there's still no evidence. It's normal scientific practice to conclude that that thing doesn't exist. So here we have our first example of argumentation theme that looks fallacious, but in fact isn't. This scientific practice is an example of argument from ignorance or similar theme, argumentation theme that is not fallacious. And he's why did I start to talk about this is that it is obvious that Gimp Panda's argument isn't fallacious just because the argument is just what I made, that this thing has been studied extensively and there is no evidence that this would be a problem, and that's the actual argument. But if we grant that every form of a argumentation theme is fallacious, then we could say that this is argument from ignorance. So the argumentation theme this looks like is argument from ignorance, not argument from silence. And in addition to that, it's not even a fallacious version of that argumentation theme, because it's normal scientific practice to work this way. But now let's go to look at what the argument from silence actually is. And here I have 2 articles and Wikipedia page, but I went through these 2 articles. This was Argument from Silence by John Lange. It's in journal History and Theology. Remember, it's history. This is important. It's in a historical journal. So journal name is History and Theology, and it's Vol 5, number 3, 1966, published in 1966, and it starts from the page 288. I try to remember to put these in description, but I'm showing you very clearly here, so if I forget, they're still extremely easy to find. And another article is here, and it's also called Argument from Silence, and it's been written by a guy called Timothy McGrew, probably Timothy McGrew. It's in the journal called it's here Acta Analytica 29, and it starts from page 215. And why I bring these 2 articles up, because they pretty much say the same thing as this Wikipedia article, and there are 3 things that Quantum Razor got wrong about this argument. Here it says, to make an argument from silence is to express a conclusion that is based on the absence of statement in a historical document rather than their presence. In the field of classical studies, it often refers to assertion that an author is ignorant of a subject based on the lack of reference to it in author's available writing. Okay, so the difference between this and argument from ignorance, which is actually mentioned here, is that argument from ignorance is a total absence of evidence, so meaning any kind of evidence, that no one has ever heard of it, no one has ever written about it, no one has ever made any kind of experiments. It can refer to any kind of experiments, documents, people saying. Arguments from ignorance can refer to all kinds of different things, and it is about the whole of the evidence about something. When this is about one document, the author of a one document not mentioning something, so it's actually, in that sense, it's actually pretty different. But I understand how it sounds similar and why these connections are made, but it's distinctly different, and this is the first thing that Quantum Razor did not understand. So that's why his example was obviously an argument from ignorance, because he didn't understand what this meant, because he probably just read a web page definition. But yeah, so that's the first difference. It applies only to document author's statement in a document, in one document at a time, and that author's statement in that one document, not evidence as whole. And the other thing is that this seems to be found only in historical studies, because as I mentioned to you that one of the journals was from history, because most of the journals I look at that had some reference to this was historical journals, because of no physicist would claim that I have this paper and this physicist does not say anything about this, so that's why it must not exist. No one would make this kind of argument in physics. Only place you probably find this kind of arguments is in historical studies. So that's why that is another thing. First is that it only applies to one single document and what author is saying in it. Second is that it's found only in history. Well, I would say that it's found only in historical journals or historical studies, because no one would make it in any other context. There might be some, but I can't think of any. And the third thing is that this isn't a fallacy. See, this isn't even, this Wikipedia page isn't considering this as fallacy. It says that an argument of silence may apply to a document only if author was expected to have the information, was intended to give a complete account of situation, and the item was important enough and interesting enough to deserve to be mentioned at a time. So it says that here or considered as fallacy, but I think it's basically more like, if you read the actual journals, the thing is more like, if one of these things is missing and then you try to, well, it's, in any case, it's weak argument, but if one of these three things, the author was expected to have the information, was intending to give the complete account, and it was interesting enough to be mentioned. If one of those is missing, then it's considered fallacious, obviously. Yeah, okay, I think I'm not going to say anything about this. It's pretty obvious that quantum Reason had no idea. Actually, this was actually the one of those that he didn't even understand the basic definition of the fallacy. So this was in a way maybe funniest of them all, because he didn't even understand the basic definitions. This one he got absolutely totally wrong, and he was even so smug about it. So this was funny to me. Let's go to the next one. Okay, it's here and it's in two different parts. So I'm going to take this reification fallacy, which is in two different parts, and then I'm going to take the anthropomorphism fallacy, which is actually in a middle of this reification fallacy, but I'm going to like merge them together, and now we are going to listen to both of the reification fallacy parts.
Period. Number 2, reification fallacy. This is a popular fallacy nowadays because it shows up everywhere. Mike, discipline, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. So, reification fallacy, when an abstraction, that is an abstract belief or hypothetical construct, is treated as if it were a concrete, real event or physical entity. When an idea is treated as if it had a real existence. The poster child, gravity bends, dilates, warps space-time. Well, why is this a reification? Well, because space, length, width, height is a concept, and time is also a concept. So you can't bend physically non-physical concepts. So that's what makes it a fallacy. So here's the biggest one. Again, reification, also known as concretism, hypostatization, shout out to Nathan, or the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, is a fallacy of ambiguity. When an abstraction, that is an abstract belief or hypothetical construct, is treated as if it were a concrete, real event or physical entity. In other words, it is the error of treating something that is not concrete, such as an idea, as a concrete thing. A common case, listen up, ballers. A common case of reification is the confusion of a model with reality. The map is not the territory. Now, to finish this up, by the way, when we charge you, we knob sack sniffing cretins, with reification, when you conjured then appealed to a model that you never had or ever will have, we're not charging you with living in or on that model. I mean, that wouldn't be a fallacy. It would be paddy wagon, horse tranquilizer, rubber room, emergency lobotomy. We're charging you with treating your model that you never had or ever will have as proof of reality or as representing reality.
So this is very important. He says model as representing reality. This is totally not this fallacy is about. This is just a little side note. But the fallacy has nothing to do with someone treating some model as representing reality. Okay, and here is this example. The map is not territory, and I'm not going to go in deep into this because this is one of the fallacies I don't see anyone actually ever making, because this would mean that somebody would think that map is the actual place, and in the case of gravity, it's easy to say that the model, of course, we don't think that our model of, for example, gravity is the actual effect gravity. We are just saying that it represents it. This is what quantum razor got totally wrong, because there's no mention anywhere in this fallacy that it says that we can claim that some model represents reality. The thing is that you shouldn't think that the model is the actual reality, but model, it's totally okay to use Newtonian equations to calculate gravity. We are not claiming that those calculations are the gravity. We are just saying that those calculations represent reality, and that is what we need to understand about this fallacy, that is extremely easy to argue that no one in the baller side is doing this, and certainly no one in the science is doing this, because model is just something that represents reality, and we don't think that the model is the actual reality. It's actually, I don't know if they're doing intentionally or unintentionally, but they are basically doing the reification fallacy themselves, because they think that if we think that our model represents reality, we are somehow saying that it is the reality. But that is not what we are doing. We are just saying that we have a model that represents reality, and that is totally okay, and it doesn't even fall under this fallacy. I have a hard time coming up with actual real examples where one would actually make this fallacy. Okay, here is next fallacy.
One underneath this is the anthropomorphism fallacy. This is the error of projecting uniquely human qualities onto something that isn't human. Usually this occurs with projecting the human qualities onto animals. But when it is done to non-living things, as in calling the storm cruel, the pathetic fallacy is created. So this is a pathetic fallacy. To be technical, science says or explains, right? Well, science doesn't have lips or vocal cords. It's not human. It's a concept. It's a method. It ain't.
Yeah, okay, we don't have to listen to it anymore, because this is one of those fallacies that I don't see no one actually making. This is kind of like very low-level sophistry, that if somebody uses the expression science says something, that our language works in a way that you should understand from the context that the other person isn't actually thinking that the science says. It's just a shorter way of saying that we have a scientific evidence for something, and I don't see no one, well, more small children make this fallacy, but well, maybe flat earthers make this also, I don't know, but normally developing adults, I don't see them making this fallacy ever. So this is one of those fallacies that I always thought of like extremely stupid to include in any textbooks. And this is actually one of the Hamblin's points also, that in fallacy textbooks and in there is, and now we have web pages, fallacy web pages. There are all kinds of fallacies that makes no sense, that nobody wouldn't make. There's no reason to talk about them, and this is one of them. Okay, and here is the next. Let's listen.
To the strawman fallacy. Oh, before I begin on this, there's a very important point. We're pointing out these logical fallacies, and whenever anyone invokes a logical fallacy into an argument, that renders that argument void. That means they don't have an argument with their premise being fallacious. It's logical fallacies are errors in reasoning. So it just renders their argument void. If they want to come back with another argument trying to prove something about that topic, that's fine. They're good to go. But in that specific case, their argument's void.
Okay, and I just included this just so I can make my case that quantum erasure obviously has the traditional definition of fallacy from this text, because as we know, if we have a argumentation scheme that looks like fallacy, it doesn't mean that argument is void. It might be totally fine, or it might just be that it's not as good, but it's still somewhat fine. Arguments come in different degrees, and yeah, this is the modern view on fallacies, not the view from, I don't know, 1800s or something.
Let's roll with the straw man fallacy. It's just like how it sounds, right? You attribute an easily refuted position to your opponent, one that the opponent wouldn't endorse, and then proceed to attack the easily refuted position, the straw man, believing you have thereby undermined the opponent's actual position. If the misrepresentation is on purpose, then the straw man fallacy is caused by lying. This is an easy one. Claim. Scientific experiments are conducted to reveal the cause of natural phenomena. What do these numpties do nonstop for the past 2.5 years? How are we supposed to conduct experiments without man-made objects? You didn't. This is a straw man, because they're not paying attention to the actual argument. Nobody ever said or will ever construct a scientific experiment without using man-made objects. You slobbering knuckle draggers. What we're saying is that the natural phenomena you observe, that is the dependent variable, must be natural. That's what we're saying.
Okay, so well, the definition of this fallacy is okay. I don't basically have anything to say about that. That is what Strawman fallacy is thought to be. And well, this argument, I actually, the next argument, I have an example on how quantum erasure is producing these fallacies by just omitting a large part of his opponent's argument. But I'm not going to do it here, because this would be kind of a long one. The next one is way shorter. It's easier to demonstrate, but I'm just telling that if you look at it this way, yeah, it looks like a Strawman fallacy, and well, it is Strawman fallacy if this would be the actual exchange, but it looks like Strawman fallacy because there is a lot of things left not said here. And then another thing is this obvious thing that they say that the not natural phenomenon they think that is different from man-made, which it's not, as it has been multiple times explained to them that it is supernatural is the difference. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to have to say anything more about that. Okay, and here we have the next fallacy that he covers in his video. Actually, this is probably the last one I'm going to cover in this video. Then I'm going to leave all the rest in the next video.
Red herring fallacy. This is a good one. We get a bunch of these. Red herring fallacy. This is unique. Now listen closely. It's a fallacy of distraction and is committed when a listener attempts to divert an arguer from his argument by introducing another topic, or that's a very important or right there. Right? This is the other part of it. Diverting attention away from the real issue by focusing instead on an issue having only a surface relevance to the first. If I had to pick a fallacy within the debating genre that we're in that happens or occurs the most, the red herring fallacy, and you all know this, happens the most.
And the reason why he thinks this, and this is also the point why it's kind of hard to see when there is a fallacious use of an argument and when there's not, is that it seems that quantum razor is unable to understand the argumentation structure, or is unwilling to understand the argumentation structure of another, and that's why he thinks that everything is red herring fallacy. And here he gives just that kind of an example, and I'm going to explain what's the actual real argument here and what he is not saying.
Yeah. What's the poster child of the red herring fallacy, especially of the surface relevance? Well, let me show you something.
The pressure gradient.
You got it. Yeah. Claim. Please show gas pressure without a container. The fallacy, baltards. How do you account for gas pressure gradients?
Okay, and now, if this was the actual argument, yes, that is true. That would seem to be a red herring fallacy. The reason why it's pretty hard to know when somebody is making any kind of fallacy, this demonstrates this, and why this is not actually a red herring fallacy is it just looks like one because there have been many of the statements is missing between the claim and between this claim and this what he calls fallacy. There is multiple stages missing, and I actually have written them out here. Okay, so here we are, but before we can go to actually analyze the red herring argument that quantum eraser was making, we have to know something about presuppositions in argument. and I've written here that every argument is based on some implicit presuppositions. And if you don't know what implicit means, I looked the definition up from Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it says that present but not consciously held or recognized. So it's just something that is that argument needs, but isn't said out loud or thought when the argument is made. And every possible argument is always based on something else. It's not just this particular argument, it's every argument. And now we can use this to analyze the claim in GUE, means quantum erasures video, and the claim, please show gas pressure without a container. It has as its implicit premise, or premise means here same thing as presupposition. So it has as its implicit presupposition or implicit premise that our atmosphere is compatible with it being held to Earth's surface by a container. And I will now name this sentence: our atmosphere is compatible with it being held to Earth's surface by container, as claim hyphen. Claim apostrophe is normally used, like apostrophes are normally used to mark these presuppositions, but I have a hard time pronouncing it, so I'm just going to use hyphen because it's much easier to pronounce. And as a distinct from the original claim, please show gas pressure without the container. So okay, when we go to the next slide, when I say claim, I mean please show gas pressure without a container, and when I say claim hyphen, I mean our atmosphere is compatible with it being held to Earth's surface by container. And now here is the I have actually analyzed the actual argument that quantum razor was analyzing, and it as is first is the claim, please show gas pressure without a container, and 4 was his fallacy, how do you account for gas pressure without a gradient? And it may look like that it is red herring fallacy, but it's not, because the whole counter argument should have been all these 1 through 4. So 1, gravity can keep atmosphere around our planet. 2, there is 2 possibilities. A, if gravity is the reason for atmosphere, there is a pressure gradient. B, if container is reason for the atmosphere, there is no gradient. So this argument claims that it has to be one of these 2 options, and the B is here because of the original claim that says that please show gas pressure without a container, and 3 is there is measurable gradient. So now we can ask, how do you account for gas pressure gradient? And it looks like that it's not actually addressing the original point, and it's not. And the reason is that it's actually attacking the claim hyphen. It's actually attacking that presupposition that original claim was making. So this is just demonstrates another problem, or why it's so hard to analyze arguments quickly or at all, because there is all kinds of things, like sometimes arguments aren't counter arguments aren't specifically designed to attack the actual claim. They are designed to attack presuppositions of that claim, and that is totally allowed, that is totally fine. There's no problem. That is not any kind of fallacy. if you can show that one of the presuppositions of that claim isn't correct, you can show that the actual claim doesn't work. So this way of attacking the claim, please show gas pressure without a container, is totally non-fallacious way of attacking this, because this argument is just saying that one of the prepositions of the original claim is wrong. And the interesting thing is about this is that the argument before this was Strawman fallacy, that quantum erasure was showing people, and when we actually analyze his red herring fallacy, it's actually a Strawman fallacy, because if you show if you claim that there is just the one and the other are counter arguments 4, and you claim that the 4 is attacking is straightforwardly attacking the original claim, it looks like a red herring fallacy. But the truth is that, and I'm not totally sure, but I'm pretty sure that quantum eraser knows this, or then he's just idiot or total, well, yeah. But so this is actually so he is making the claim that the argument would be that the 4 is designed to counter the claim, the 1 here, but it's not, because as I explained, it's designed to attack one of the premises of the original argument. So our fallacy expert is making obvious, and there is like no question about this is very obvious Strawman fallacy. So our fallacy expert actually made, I don't know, by accident or by purposefully made a Strawman fallacy. I don't know what the case is, but anyway, he made obvious Strawman fallacy, because this is the actual argument, and what he showed is easily knocked down because it makes no sense. But it makes no sense because it isn't the actual argument that is being made, because this is the actual argument. And I'm going to leave this video here. Hope you found this informative. This is actually pretty long video, so I don't know if anybody got to the end of this. The next video will also be about fallacies, and then I'm going to go back to the questions in scientific method. This is actually one of my interests, is fallacies, but I just don't feel that I'm as qualified in fallacy research as I'm in philosophy of science or scientific method. But I maybe start doing some of these, because flat earthers have weaponized the fallacies, and I would like to give people some weapons against the fallacious use of fallacies, wrongful use of fallacies. Yeah, so if you like this video, come back in about 3 days or a week, I'm not sure, and I will go through rest of the fallacies and why quantum erasure doesn't know what he's talking about when he talks about fallacies. Bye.